What exactly is the role of your non-dominant hand and arm on your forehand? In this video, I'm going to show you that your offhand has a role not only taking back the racket, but also throughout the entire motion and on the finish. So let's get going. In some of the stroke analyses that I have been sent over the last couple of weeks, incidentally, a few players had the exact same issues, and that was not using the offhand correctly. By the way, I am offering stroke analysis, match analysis, and also mental skills sessions for those who are not able to work with me directly. So these online services, I'll put the link down below in the description. You can access from anywhere in the world, but let's keep going with the forehand. Your offhand, for me it's my left hand, should help you big time to get into a good coil or unit turn. And the easiest way for that to happen is that your left hand, your non-dominant hand, stays attached to the racket on the throat of the racket. And by attach, I mean the racket is literally just resting either in the V of your hand or lightly here in the tips of your fingers. You don't want to hold on to the racket for dear life. And you notice now that not only am I turning, I'm also lifting my racket a little bit. Meaning my hand here stays between my shoulder and my hip, but my racket face is for sure above my hand. Theoretically, there's nothing wrong if I didn't necessarily have the racket lift, but it does help to basically start creating a loop. It's a C, basically, a C shape, and that helps me then get into the racket drop. And that means that the racket head is below my hand and the incoming ball. So you create a whole lot more topspin if you initially have that lift and then let it drop. If you don't do that, you just have a flatter forehand. Nothing wrong with that, but we want to get a little bit more topspin, better net clearance. Players with really, really good forehands keep their left arm hand on the racket past their own midline. Think about Carlos Alcaraz. His left hand is still attached basically to the racket way behind his own body. And that's how he gets so much coil, because if you're not blocking yourself by keeping your hips locked, if you allow them to rotate, now you're in a perfect unit turn, meaning that your shoulders are back and your hips are turned. And that is what you need for a massive forehand. What does the offhand do now after the racket has left it and is on that C-shaped path, that loop, racket drop, whatever you want to call that, and also then gets into the lag position? This here will happen naturally, so don't worry about forcing yourself into it. But since this video is about the offhand, your offhand stays in front of your left shoulder here. So as your dominant arm now is moving the racket up and forward to your contact point, and it doesn't matter, by the way, whether you hit it closed stand, semi-open, open, it doesn't matter. Your left hand tucks in front of your left shoulder, and depending on who the player is, this can look very, very different. So let's look at a few really good forehands. So Naomi Osaka, on her forehand, she keeps the fingers together and she keeps this angle here, but ends up in front of her left shoulder. And then Dominic Thiem, you can see here, doesn't have his wrist here flexed, but has the hand all spread, the fingers all spread, and also ends up in front right here over his left shoulder. So how you hold your hand, what that looks like, that is style. The fundamental though is, and every good forehand has that, is that it tucks and it continues to rotate. And of course, the same is true for left-handers. So that your entire body can rotate freely and you can really get some pop on that forehand. And the easiest way I always thought about this is to think when you're walking on a tightrope. So one of the things that you need your offhand for is for balance. If you were to walk on a tightrope, you wouldn't just do this. You would need your other hand as well to balance. So one of the things it helps with is balance. The other reason I find that even more important than the balance part is you created massive energy by rotating here. If you're now just letting your left arm drop like a dead fish, you're hindering the reaction of this action here, the rotation. So you're kind of blocking the rotation. How can you work on this? There's a good old drill, and oftentimes some drills are not really applicable for the more modern tennis, but this one absolutely does. I've done that when I was a kid and it still applies. It's the good old catch that racket over your left shoulder. I know it's going to feel a little weird in the beginning, but do try to keep that left arm out. Just shadow it super slow, because you've done the hanging down, the dead fish forehand probably thousands and thousands of times, so you have to reprogram your brain. Turn, racket drop, and just guide it over. Perfectly fine here, and then let it rest in your V. And then when you feel you can do it a little bit more fluently, go ahead and increase the pace. And then of course you do it when you're hitting balls. Does that mean that you're now always having to catch your racket over your left shoulder? Absolutely not. It is just a drill that will help you facilitate the entire rotation and make you very aware that your left arm can't just dead fish it. See, so for instance, I don't catch the racket. I can make myself do it, absolutely. But when I play points, I don't catch it. But my left arm is active. So again, exactly where and how often that offhand catches the racket, that is style. The fundamental is that you're not hindering your rotation. You're actually enabling that by having a very active offhand.